The spring of 1940 saw France teetering on the brink of collapse. This nation was steeped in history and pride. The collapse was not just from the relentless German advance. It also stemmed from a festering internal rot. Political infighting, a venomous current, had fatally weakened the Third Republic. Prime Minister Paul Reynaud and his Minister of National Defense, Edouard Daladier, were locked in a bitter personal and ideological feud. Their animosity was so profound that even their mistresses engaged in public maligning. This further poisoned the atmosphere. This deep-seated distrust was coupled with the perceived incompetence of figures like General Maurice Gamelin. It led to a paralysis at the highest levels of government. While Germany unleashed its blitzkrieg, France found itself caught in a sitzkrieg of its own making. This was a sitting war of political stagnation. It left France fatally exposed. As the German juggernaut rolled through the Ardennes, the French government fled Bordeaux. It shattered illusions of an impassable forest. In the ensuing chaos, a desperate plan emerged. The plan was to continue the fight from North Africa. On June 21, 1940, Daladier and other prominent politicians boarded the liner Massilia. They set sail for Casablanca. Their hopes, however, were quickly dashed. Upon arrival, General Charles-Auguste Nogues displayed a cautious ambiguity. He was the commander-in-chief of French forces in North Africa. His ambiguity bordered on betrayal. He stalled, awaiting instructions from the nascent Vichy regime under Marshal Philippe Pétain. Eventually, he detained the Massilia group. Daladier reflected on the general's hesitant loyalty. He famously remarked, "Strange fellow, this General Nogues, who felt he had to ask the government for permission to rebel." The Massilia incident marked not a continuation of the fight. It was the first act of French politicians becoming pawns in a new, darker game. With France capitulated, its law enforcement was now subordinate to German control. The Vichy regime, desperate for legitimacy, embarked on a politically motivated witch hunt. Daladier and Gamelin were among the first high-profile figures arrested. This happened in September 1940. By February 1942, the infamous Riem trial commenced. It was a hastily assembled show trial. It was intended to scapegoat the Third Republic's leaders for France's defeat. It also aimed to solidify Petain's authoritarian rule. Pétain himself publicly condemned the defendants. He called them the men who betrayed France. He hoped for a blistering indictment to cement Vichy's narrative. Yet the trial backfired spectacularly. Daladier, with his encyclopedic recall, mounted a brilliant defense. The eloquent Leon Blum also mounted a brilliant defense. They exposed the proceedings as a sham. General Gamelin, though diminutive in stature, offered his own silent protest. He refused to acknowledge the court's authority. The trial unfolded over 24 public sessions. It became a public relations disaster for Vichy. It discredited its claims and earned the defendants sympathy in the foreign press. It was not a genuine search for accountability. It was a cynical political maneuver. It was a myth of justice that quickly unraveled. Hitler, enraged by the trial's failure, ordered its temporary suspension. This happened in April 1942. The fate of the accused now shifted from Vichy's unreliable grasp to the iron fist of Nazi Germany. The Allied invasion of North Africa, Operation Torch, further sealed their doom. This occurred in November 1942. Germany responded by fully occupying Vichy France. This transformed Petain's government into a mere puppet. This complete German control made the high-profile prisoners far more vulnerable. On March 31, 1943, Daladier, Gamelin, and the ailing Labour leader Léon Jouhaux were brusquely transferred from Vichy custody. German soldiers handcuffed Jouhaux and shoved him into a military ambulance. This marked their journey into deeper captivity. They were eventually transported to Buchenwald concentration camp. This was a sprawling, menacing facility. Leon Blum, due to his Jewish heritage, would remain there. This was a stark reminder of the true horrors of the Nazi regime. Others were moved to special detention. Blum would survive Buchenwald, where 56,000 perished. He was eventually liberated by Allied troops in May 1945. This was a testament to his resilience. The Nazi regime, however, had a different plan for some of these high-profile French figures. They were not merely prisoners for punishment. They were honor prisoners, strategic assets to be held for potential political leverage or exchange. Leon Jouot, a Nobel Peace Prize winner and a powerful labor leader, had long been a target. He was targeted by both Vichy and Nazi Germany. An Allied escape plan for him in November 1941 was tragically thwarted by a double agent. This led to his arrest. He was subsequently transferred to German custody in March 1943. Paul Reynaud, whose political downfall had preceded his initial arrest by Vichy, was also swept into German hands. By mid-March 1943, he found himself in the bunker. This was a notorious cell block. It was surrounded by a high-voltage fence within the vast Sachsenhausen concentration camp system. This was a brutal contrast to the relative comfort he would later find. His elegant secretary, Christiane Mabier, was described as a tall, slender girl with the hands and feet of a thoroughbred. She was also arrested by the Gestapo in November 1942. She endured solitary confinement in Fresnes prison. She was then transported to the women's concentration camp at Ravensbrück. She was held as a high-value prisoner. Even Jean Barotra, the renowned tennis star, initially a Vichy collaborator, found himself arrested by the Gestapo in November 1942. He was arrested after defying Nazi demands. He was similarly transferred to German custody. This initial phase of the war established a complex web of intrigue, betrayal, and strategic imprisonment. It was marked by France's internal political turmoil and military collapse. Vichy's desperate attempts at self-legitimation also played a part. Hitler's strategic consolidation of power over key figures was crucial. This unique and precarious situation ultimately set the stage for extraordinary events. These events would unfold at Schloss Itter. This remote Austrian castle would become a crucible for an improbable alliance in the dying days of the Third Reich. Even for the high-profile French figures confined within its ancient walls, Schloss Itter was a prison. It is often romanticized as a country club for the elite. Yet, the castle's imposing structure, with its dry moat and thick battlements, held a chilling inscription. Over its entrance it read, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." It was a grim greeting. It was a stark reminder that despite relative comforts, they were still captives. They had a library, a garden, and plentiful if plain food. They were in the heart of Hitler's Reich. Overseeing their precarious existence was SS Captain Sebastian Waistel Wimmer. His brutality was as much a part of the castle's atmosphere as the cold alpine air. Wimmer, a veteran of atrocities at Dachau and Majdanek, found his posting at Itter a comfortable reprieve. It was a reprieve from the Eastern Front's grinding horrors, yet this relative ease did nothing to temper his cruel nature. Under his command, the castle pulsated with an undercurrent of terror. This was particularly true for the number prisoners. These were the forced laborers and female concentration camp inmates. They were identified by their tattooed numbers. They served the SS and the French VIPs alike. These unfortunates slept on straw-covered floors in cramped upper levels. Their suffering was a constant silent counterpoint to the more privileged confinement downstairs. Wimmer's unpredictable rages, often fueled by alcohol, kept everyone on edge. He would scream at the Croat handyman Zvonko Kukovic for a leaking toilet. Then he would force him to shovel snow for 12 hours. This was a petty exercise of power. Kukovic, a resistance fighter assigned to electrical work, learned to navigate this capricious cruelty. He even earned a brief, transactional reward of time with his family. This happened after repairing an electric motor for Wimmer, yet the price of such small mercies was constant fear. It was a visceral understanding of the SS doctrine of inflexible harshness. This permeated every stone of the castle. General Gamelin, a man of quiet dignity, once famously confronted Wimmer. He declared, "You cannot beat a prisoner." This was a futile act of defiance against a man who revelled in control. Wimmer even took perverse joy in the squabbles of his high-value captives. He found entertainment in their animosities. Into this crucible of privileged captivity and underlying terror, a politically diverse and often fractious group of French notables arrived. They came one by one, from May 1943 through the spring of 1945. Former Prime Ministers Édouard Daladier and Paul Reynaud, whose mutual loathing was legendary, were among them. They were joined by General Maurice Gamelin and Labour leader Lien Yuhu. Reynaud, upon his arrival, had exclaimed, "This is paradise." He compared it to the horrors of Sachsenhausen. This sentiment underscored the unique, if still oppressive, nature of Itter. His elegant secretary, Christiane Mabea, arrived later. Her transfer was orchestrated by Wimmer. He saw her as a potential future political asset. The castle's population grew to include figures whose very presence highlighted deep cleavages within French society. Marcel Granger, a resistance fighter, was held as a blatant hostage. This was to influence his brother-in-law, the Allied-aligned general Henry Giraud. His defiant demeanor and grim recounting of Dachau's horrors served as a stark reminder. It reminded all that their honor status was a fragile shield. Then came Maxime Weygand, former army chief of staff, and his wife, Marie-Renée Josephine. Their arrival shattered any illusion of shared adversity, fostering camaraderie. Reynaud, blaming Weygand for France's 1940 defeat, audibly muttered, "Traitor, collaborator." Weygand, whose own history of overcoming personal slights made him defiant, retorted, "Hooligan." The great hall, meant for communal meals and conversation, often saw these political rivals seated at separate tables. Their animosity was a palpable tension in the air. Michael Clemenceau, son of the formidable tiger Georges Clemenceau, arrived seemingly healthy and cheerful. This was despite his opposition to Petain's collaboration. His presence brought a different kind of political lineage to the castle. He was soon followed by François de la Roque. His haggard appearance belied a complex past. Though he had led right-wing movements and served in Vichy, de la Roque had secretly funneled intelligence to Britain. This challenged any simplistic categorization as merely a fascist collaboration. His clandestine work for the Allies was a testament to the war's shifting loyalties and hidden narratives. The final poignant arrivals were Marie Agnès and Alfred Callioux. They were the sister and brother-in-law of General Charles de Gaulle. They were held as crucial hostages. Despite Marie Agnès's desperate plea upon arrival, hoping for French solidarity, their hopes were quickly dashed. This was due to the obstinately quarrelsome nature of their fellow prisoners. Even Augusta Brooklyn, Joho's devoted companion, found herself navigating a minefield of old grudges. She had displayed unwavering loyalty to join him. She navigated these political rivalries. Schloss Itter, therefore, became far more than just a prison. It was a living, breathing microcosm of France's wartime fault lines. Here, under the watchful, often cruel eyes of SS Captain Wimmer, former enemies of the Third Republic were forced into an uneasy proximity. Collaborators, resistance figures, and their loved ones were also there. Their shared captivity, rather than forging unity, often amplified their deep-seated political divisions and personal animosities. Their fates were inextricably tied to the shifting tides of a war. Even in this remote Austrian castle, that war was rapidly drawing to a chaotic close. The grand, calculated chess game of World War II was now dissolving into a desperate, bloody scramble. It had begun with the timid thrusts of the phony war and the brutal, efficient invasion of Poland. The initial shock and awe of the Blitzkrieg had given way to the slow, grinding horror of total war. This conflict, in April 1945, was closing in on the Austrian Tyrol from all sides. From the east, the Soviet juggernaut pressed inexorably towards the Reich's heart. It had crushed German resistance at Stalingrad and driven relentlessly westward. From the south, Allied armies pushed ever closer. They had battled their way through Italy and seized Rome. Their lead elements were less than 15 miles from the ancient walls of Schloss Itter. Tyrol, once envisioned as a final Nazi redoubt, had instead become a volatile, contested zone. It was a mountain fortress for Hitler's last stand. It was a landscape of crumbling authority and desperate choices. Within this collapsing regime, the myth of a monolithic, fanatically loyal German army began to unravel. It revealed the profound internal dissent that simmered beneath the surface. Joseph Sepp Gangl, a decorated career Wehrmacht soldier, embodied this shift. His path to military service had been forged in the crucible of post-World War I economic depression. It was a disciplined escape from the high unemployment that plagued a generation. While the rise of Nazism had politicized the Reichswehr, rewarding public adherence to the party, Gangl's long years of combat had stripped away any illusions. This was particularly true of the fierce and constant fighting on the Eastern Front. The ferocious Russian winter and endless engagements had ground down his unit. With it, his faith was also ground down. He arrived in Austria in mid-April 1945. He sought a quiet backwater to wait out the war. He found himself instead at a profound moral crossroads. Driven by an overwhelming commitment to a far greater good than the dying Reich, Gangl made an audacious, life-threatening choice. He chose to betray his oath. He contacted Alois Mayer, leader of the Wargl resistance cell. This was a blatant act of treason. It put his own life and those of his wife and daughter in mortal peril. In a landscape crawling with SS and Gestapo units, Gangl provided the resistance with vital intelligence. These units were summarily executing suspected anti-Nazis. Gangl provided information on Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS movements. Crucially, he supplied them with weapons. His actions implicitly debunked the simplistic narrative that all German soldiers were fanatical Nazis. They showcased the deep internal conflict and shifting allegiances that fragmented the Wehrmacht in its final days. Gangl's defiance was not an isolated act. The Austrian resistance, initially a fragmented collection of propaganda cells, had coalesced into the formidable O5 organization. This happened by December 1944. This nascent movement, including figures like Friedrich Werthel and Rupert Hagleitner, forged a critical partnership. It partnered with the USA Office of Strategic Services, or OSS. They received weapons and training. This transformed them into a genuine threat. Operating under constant threat of exposure and arrest, these 80 dedicated members worked tirelessly to undermine Nazi rule. They were armed with everything from hunting rifles to MP40s. Their acts of sabotage and intelligence gathering were a constant thorn in the side of the occupiers. The war's chaotic end further eroded German military discipline. It created unprecedented opportunities for defection and unlikely alliances. SS Captain Kurt Siegfried Schrader, a decorated Waffen-SS officer, had once believed in Hitler. His uniform bore the chilling Death's Head totem and double lightning stroke SS runes. But the inferno of Normandy shattered those illusions. He suffered severe head and leg wounds there. The July 20th assassination attempt on Hitler proved to be Schrader's breaking point. He mentally broke with the Führer and the Nazi Party. His sole concern became the protection of his family. During his convalescence, he found an unexpected camaraderie with the French prisoners at Schloss Itter. He shared rough Tyrolean red wine with them. He made small cakes for his daughters alongside the castle cook. This personal connection solidified his growing disillusionment. Cautiously, and fraught with danger, he began sounding out his colleagues about ending the war. He knew the wrong word could lead to a firing squad. This was by the very Waffen-SS troops executing defeatists. This starkly contrasted with the likes of SS Captain Sebastian Wastel Wimmer. He was the brutish commandant of Schloss Itter. He had perpetrated atrocities at Dachau and Majdanek. His inflexible harshness was a reward for his brutality. This was a stark reminder of the fanatical SS TV troops who implemented Nazi policy without question. Schrader, prioritizing peace and family over fanaticism, challenged the simplistic, unified image of the Nazi regime. He revealed the profound cleavages within its ranks. The convergence of Allied forces and the internal decay of the Nazi regime created an intensely volatile environment in Tyrol. Individual acts of conscience, like Gangl's treason and Schrader's defection, coupled with the nascent strength of the O5 resistance, laid the groundwork for a series of unexpected alliances and desperate acts. In the final chaotic days of the Third Reich, the lines between friend and foe blurred. This paved the way for a truly extraordinary stand at Schloss Itter. As Germany's collapse accelerated, a chilling new threat emerged at Schloss Itter. The SS, now a desperate cornered beast, saw the high-profile prisoners not as captives to be held. They saw them as potential bargaining chips. Worse, they were liabilities to be eliminated before liberation. The air inside the ancient walls grew heavy with dread. It was a palpable fear that the end of the war might bring not freedom, but execution. It was this terror that propelled Zvonko Kovic, the Croat handyman, into the perilous night of May 3rd. His desperate dash for Allied lines, carrying a handwritten plea from Christian Mabier, was more than an escape. It was a desperate gamble for the lives of everyone in the castle. It was a signal of the profound urgency of their situation. Kukovich's perilous journey, though it did not directly lead him to Gangli, was mirrored by an urgent plea. This plea was delivered by Andreas Krobot to the disillusioned Wehrmacht major in Wargl. Joseph Gangl had already defied his oath to protect Warg's citizens from the marauding Waffen-SS. He understood the message instantly. The French VIPs at Schloss Itter were in mortal danger. His dozen men, armed with hunting rifles and MP40s, were no match for the fanatical SS units now swarming the region. Gangl knew a rescue attempt by his small resistance force would be suicidal. The only hope lay with the advancing Americans. His resolve hardened. He would seek them out personally. Meanwhile, the relentless American advance had brought Captain John C. Lee Jr. and his task force Lee into Austria. Lee was a veteran of the brutal fighting at bloody Herrlichheim. He commanded Company B of the 23rd Tank Battalion. It was a unit seasoned by combat. It was equipped with the formidable improved Sherman tanks. On the afternoon of May 4th, as his column paused in Kufstein, the war-weary Lee was confronted by an unexpected sight. He was hoping for an end to the fighting. A German Kubelwagen bearing a white flag was approaching his lines. From it emerged Major Joseph Gangli, accompanied by his driver Hans Kablich. Gangl, a figure of quiet dignity, presented a letter. It detailed the French VIPs' plight and the impending SS threat. Lee, a man whose mental alertness and aggressiveness had been noted by his instructors, faced a request. It flew in the face of conventional orders. No clear directive covered rescuing French VIPs from a remote Austrian castle with a German officer as an ally. But the urgency in Gangl's voice, the sheer audacity of the situation, resonated with Lee's piratical nature. He made the bold, immediate decision to act. Just before 5:30 p.m., Lee, with Gangl, Wargelleitner, and his gunner, Corporal Simchik, embarked on a personal reconnaissance. They navigated narrow dirt tracks through potentially hostile territory. Their helmets were on the floor, and M3 submachine guns were ready. Lee solidified his understanding. Daladier, later reflecting on Lee, would describe him as crude in both looks and manners. Reynaud saw a fine figure of a football player. This was a testament to the Americans' imposing presence and decisive action. With the reconnaissance complete, the full rescue column formed. It was a precarious mix of American audacity and German desperation. Spearheaded by Lee's M4A376W Sherman tank, Besotten Jenny, this small force set out. It consisted of 7 Americans and 14 defecting Wehrmacht soldiers. Former Waffen-SS Hauptsturmführer Kurt Siegfried Schrader was also with them. This force represented the last, best hope for the prisoners at Schloss Itter. It was an alliance born not of ideology, but of immediate, shared peril. The journey was fraught with immediate logistical and tactical challenges. The narrow, twisting Itterstrasse, leading to the castle, culminated in a 60-foot-long access road and a ravine bridge. The sheer weight of Besotten Jenny caused the bridge to groan, metal girders bent, and stone fragments dropped into the chasm below. It was a perilous, audacious maneuver. It was a physical manifestation of the mission's inherent vulnerability. As the tank finally cleared the bridge and eased into the snow-dusted courtyard, the French VIPs found their enthusiasm quickly dimmed. They were initially overjoyed. Their cavalry was a single, somewhat shop-worn tank and a handful of Americans. They were accompanied by armed Germans, their former captors. Reynaud noted that Clemenceau's unshakable confidence was a reassurance. But the initial outburst of Gallic outrage at being told to shelter in the basement showed their grudging acceptance. This was their only hope for liberation. This desperate convergence transcended conventional allegiances. It was a convergence of disillusioned German soldiers like Gangl, Austrian resistance members, and American forces. It was driven by the individual courage of men like Lee. It was an improbable alliance, forged in the chaotic, bloody twilight of the Third Reich. It set the stage for one of World War II's most unique and compelling battles. The castle settled into a tense, uneasy silence. Just after 9:30, Captain Jack Lee lay on a narrow bed in the SS Guards dormitory. It was on the first floor of the keep. He had made his final preparations for the night. Still wearing his boots and pistol belt, he awaited the inevitable assault. The metallic tang of fear and anticipation was thick in the alpine air. The ad hoc garrison hunkered down. It was a motley crew of American soldiers, Wehrmacht defectors under Major Joseph Gangel, and even some high-profile French VIPs. Their disparate pasts were momentarily forgotten. They faced a shared existential threat. The first probes came just after 4 a.m. Sharp cracks of rifle fire and the mechanical chatter of a machine gun shattered the pre-dawn quiet. Lee raced from his room, assessing the enemy's probing attacks on the gatehouse. Figures moved in the ravine, targeted by Private Sutton's vigilant M1 Garand. The Sherman tank, Besotton Jenny, laid down suppressing fire. Its 50-caliber Browning machine gun spit thumb-sized rounds. Tracers arced like angry red streams against the darkness. But this was merely a prelude. The situation escalated dramatically at 8:30 that morning. Lee, scanning the approaches, spotted ominous silhouettes. A 20mm anti-aircraft cannon and a formidable 88mm gun were being positioned by the approaching Waffen-SS. Just 10 minutes later, between 100 and 150 Waffen-SS reinforcements arrived in Kubelwagen vehicles. This transformed the skirmish into an imminent full-scale assault. The fearsome reputation of the 88mm gun, a killer of Allied tanks, signaled an overwhelming threat. The battle for Schloss Itter began in earnest just after 10 a.m. The familiar whine of an 88mm shell was followed by a blast. It slammed into the keep, gouging dinner plate-sized holes in the ancient stonework. It narrowly missed former Prime Minister Edouard Daladier. Incoming bullets made the curtains dance. They then thudded into the chamber's ornate wooden ceiling. The castle shuddered under the barrage. It was a continuous symphony of explosions and small arms fire, complicating matters. An 8 a.m. defection by one of the German soldiers to the Waffen-SS created a profound crisis of trust. This was among the defenders. The fear of betrayal was a cold, internal enemy. It added another layer of dread to the external assault. The SS now had crucial intelligence. This turned the desperate defense into an even more precarious gamble. In the midst of this escalating chaos, the defenders suffered a critical blow. The Sherman tank, Besotton Jenny, their main source of heavy fire, was struck by a 75mm PaK-40 anti-tank round. The vehicle erupted into an inferno of flames and exploding ammunition. This forced its crew to abandon the burning wreck and join the ground defense. The loss of the tank, a metallic clang that reverberated through the castle, severely weakened their outer perimeter. It forced the remaining defenders further inward. Not long after, Major Sepp Gangel, the courageous Wehrmacht officer who had allied with the Americans, made a fatal dash across the courtyard. He did this to shield Paul Reynaud from a sniper. He fell, a profound loss. His sacrifice was a stark reminder of the battle's severity and the high stakes involved. Despite the overwhelming odds and the desperate situation, the battle raged on. It revealed unexpected depths of courage and unity. The French VIPs, initially ordered to shelter in the basement, defied Captain Lee's instructions. Driven from the cold cellars, they moved to the relative warmth of the Great Hall. Many actively joined the defense. Paul Reynaud, the former Prime Minister, calmly retrieved an MP-40 submachine gun from his trunk. He posted himself at a loophole alongside soldiers and other politicians. He was ready to fire on the advancing Waffen-SS troops. Christiane Mabier, Reynaud's elegant secretary, also joined the resistance. Her presence was a testament to the defiance that transcended gender and political standing. The young German lieutenant, Blechschmidt, used hand gestures to communicate defensive positions. He seamlessly integrated into the multinational defense. For a fleeting period, the old animosities and political rivalries that had defined their shared captivity vanished. They were replaced by a common purpose against a common brutal enemy. Even Augusta Brooklyn, one of the VIPs, later explained their reasoning for moving to the Great Hall. She highlighted their refusal to be passive victims. As ammunition ran perilously low, the situation inside the castle became dire. Communications were broken. The defenders' new relief was desperately delayed. It was in this moment of extreme peril that French tennis star Jean Borotre undertook a pivotal, heroic escape. Disguised as an Austrian refugee, he climbed over the castle walls. He evaded SS patrols and waded through a swift-flowing stream. He made his way to the advancing American forces in Warg. There, Borotra, hardly winded despite his arduous journey, relayed critical information about the castle's plight. He also relayed a proposed rescue plan to the American command. Finally, just after 4 p.m., the distant sound of automatic weapons and tank guns from the village signaled a radical change. Captain Joe Gill, leading infantryman, and his battalion commander Marvin Coyle pushed through well-defended roadblocks. Their arrival was guided by Borotra's desperate plea. An American M4 Sherman tank, Boschbuster, engaged and destroyed an anti-tank gun. This cleared the way. As Boschbuster rolled to a stop at the village end of the Schlossweg, its appearance prompted the SS men to evaporate into the woods. Defenders poured out of the castle, jubilantly greeting their rescuers. A tired Jack Lee, seeing Lieutenant Elliot, quipped sarcastically, "What kept you?" He then handed over command to Colonel George Lynch of the 142nd Infantry Regiment. Lynch immediately established a security perimeter. The successful defense of Schloss Itter and the liberation of its high-profile French prisoners represented a unique, improbable victory. This occurred in the chaotic final hours of World War II. It was a battle that transcended traditional enemy lines. It showcased an instance where American and German soldiers fought side by side against a common fanatical foe. This extraordinary bravery and the breakdown of rigid wartime allegiances challenged any perception of a clean, organized surrender. It demonstrated the complex human-driven fluidity of the war's final, desperate days. The successful defense of Schloss Itter culminated in the liberation of 142 high-profile French prisoners. It was a brutal 11-hour siege against fanatical Waffen-SS forces. As the American relief column, spearheaded by the tank Boschbuster, rolled into the courtyard, the SS attackers evaporated into the woods. Their last desperate gambit was thwarted. The castle was secured. This marked not just a singular victory, it was the very last major ground combat action of World War II in Europe. Yet, liberation did not instantly erase the deep-seated political divisions and personal animosities. These had festered among the French VIPs throughout their captivity. The shared ordeal against a common enemy had forged a temporary fragile unity. But in the immediate aftermath, old rivalries quickly resurfaced. Inside the Great Hall, the VIPs segregated themselves into their pre-existing political groups. This was even as their American rescuers established a security perimeter. The tension was palpable. Canadian war correspondent René Levesque navigated this charged atmosphere. He noted former Prime Minister Daladier's murderous look at Reynaud. It was coupled with veiled threats to unmask certain individuals in his forthcoming memoirs. The practicalities of post-war life, for many, immediately meant a return to political maneuvering. It also meant the pursuit of perceived collaborators. Just before 7 p.m., a convoy of American jeeps and trucks transported the chattering, gesticulating VIPs and their luggage. They left the now secured castle. Their journey took them first to Innsbruck. Then they crossed the German border to Augsburg. By May 7th, the very day of Germany's unconditional capitulation, they reached French First Army Commander Jean de Lattre de Tassigny's headquarters in Lindau. He arranged their triumphant return to France. Many, like Daladier and Reynaud, would re-enter the political arena. Others, like the Croat handyman Zvonko Kukovic, were repatriated to their home countries. Their paths diverged once more. The Battle of Schloss Itter, though a relatively minor engagement in the grand scale of the war, holds profound historical importance. It stands as a powerful testament to the complex and often contradictory nature of alliances and loyalties at the conflict's end. It was a rare, almost unbelievable instance. US and German soldiers fought side by side against a common fanatical enemy. These were loyal SS units desperately clinging to the dying embers of the Reich. This extraordinary event implicitly challenges the simplistic idea of a monolithic German surrender. It showcases instances of Wehrmacht soldiers, like Major Joseph Gangl, actively fighting against the SS alongside Allied forces. It highlights the deeply human element of war. Individuals like Gangly, Captain Jack Lee, and tennis star Jean Borotra made complex moral choices. They displayed extraordinary courage. They transcended national allegiances for a greater good. Gangly, who died shielding Reynaud, would be remembered as an Austrian national hero. SS Captain Kurt Siegfried Schrader, who defected to protect the prisoners, received a note of commendation from the VIPs. This was for ensuring their safety. Lee, for his leadership, would be awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. However, the post-war trajectories of many key figures revealed the enduring personal costs of conflict. They also showed the challenges of reintegration into civilian life. Jack Lee, the American hero of Schloss Itter, returned from active duty in January 1946. Despite his wartime valor, his post-war life became a slow but seemingly inexorable downward spiral. His inability to secure a professional football career, combined with increased drinking, marital problems, and financial difficulties, underscored a profound challenge. It was the challenge of finding purpose and stability after such extraordinary experiences. The war, for many, did not end with the ceasefire. The fate of other individuals, including the pursuit of war criminals like Adolf Eichmann, underscored the difficulty of achieving complete justice and accountability. Eichmann famously escaped through Austria. The lingering presence of Nazi sympathizers also contributed to this difficulty. The liberation of concentration camps like Buchenwald, where Leon Blum had been held, brought justice for some. This was done by Allied troops in May 1945. It allowed Blum to return to politics. But the shadows of atrocities and unpunished crimes stretched long into the future. The narrative of Schloss Itter, therefore, implicitly challenges any notion that the war was a clean or easily concluded affair. It showcases the continued dangers and complex alliances that defined the war's final days. It also highlights the long-term, often devastating personal tolls on those who fought. Decades later, reconstructing the events of this odd little battle would prove challenging. The passage of time obscured truth. Memories faded, crucial records were destroyed. The improbable fight for Schloss Itter, therefore, remains a powerful, if complicated, testament to the human spirit. It is a story of courage, betrayal, and the lingering shadows that even the brightest dawn of liberation could not fully dispel.